Do you want to know why I left the Arizona Highway Patrol? Do you want to know why I stayed in America and moved to Mayan, the farthest point from the desert? It wasn't the heat. It wasn't the danger. It wasn't even the drug cartels, which were truly agonizing to deal with. The reason was simply a rest stop. A rest stop located at the 89 miles marker on Highway 40 between Flagstaff and Kingman. For those watching this from Arizona right now, especially those near I-40, do me a favor and check the time and write it down. Because if you stop at that rest area between 2 and 4 in the morning, you won't just lose a few hours of sleep, you could lose 48 hours of your life. Believe me, friends, you don't want to know where those hours go. Before continuing the story, if you subscribe to our channel and like it, you'll make us very happy. Those who want to support us further can do so via Super Chat, and that would be fantastic. My name is Marcus Torres. I served as an Arizona State Police officer for over 15 years, and that's the real reason I'll never go back to the desert. The Mojave Desert in August is hell with a scenic view. The temperature hits 120 degrees in the shade, assuming you can find any shade. The asphalt literally melts under your tires, and the heat mirages make the highway look like it's underwater. I'd been patrolling Interstate 40 for 7 years by August 2019, the long stretch between Flagstaff and the California border. It's a lonely beat. Hundreds of miles of nothing but desert, scattered rest stops, and the occasional town that looks like it gave up on existence sometime in the 1970s. I actually like the isolation. After 3 tours in Iraq with the Marines, the empty desert felt peaceful rather than threatening. Out here, the biggest dangers were usually dehydration, rattlesnakes, and tourists who thought they could hike in flip-flops. The drug runners stayed further south, closer to the border. The human traffickers used different routes. I-40 was mostly just truckers, tourists heading to the Grand Canyon, and locals who knew better than to stop anywhere they didn't have to. The rest stop at mile marker 89 had always been unremarkable. It was one of those basic facilities the state maintained. Restrooms, vending machines, picnic tables, and a parking area big enough for maybe 20 cars and half a dozen semis. During the day, it was busy enough. Families stretching their legs, truckers catching mandatory rest, but at night, especially between 2 and 4 a.m., it was usually dead empty. That's why I like to use it for my break point during night shifts. Park the cruiser where it was visible from the highway to deter speeders, catch up on paperwork, maybe grab a terrible cup of coffee from the vending machine that hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration. Everything changed on August 15th, 2019. It was a Thursday, I remember, because I was thinking about the weekend, planning to take my daughter camping up near Sedona, where it was cooler. I'd started my shift at 10 o'clock p.m., and by 2 a.m., I was ready for a break. The radio had been quiet all night. A few speeding tickets, 1 DUI, nothing major. I pulled into the rest stop at 2:03 a.m. According to my dash cam, which would become important later, there were 3 vehicles already there. A white Toyota Camry with California plates, a red Ford F-150 with Arizona tags, and a Winnebago that had seen better decades. Not unusual. People often stopped to sleep for a few hours rather than risk driving tired through the desert. I parked in my usual spot where I could see both the highway and the rest area, left the engine running for the AC, and started working on my incident reports. At 2:17 a.m., I noticed something odd. A woman had gotten out of the Camry and was walking toward the restroom building. Nothing strange about that except for the way she was walking. It wasn't a normal walk. It was perfectly steady, perfectly straight, like she was on rails. Her arms didn't swing. Her head didn't move. She looked like a video game character whose walking animation was broken. I watched her enter the restroom and decided to keep an eye on the situation. You develop instincts after years on the job, and something about this felt wrong. 5 minutes passed, then 10. After 15 minutes, I decided to check on her. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she was using drugs. Maybe she needed help. I walked to the women's restroom and called out, "Ma'am, Arizona Highway Patrol. Is everything all right in there?" No response. I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. The rest area was dead silent except for the distant hum of traffic on I-40. I was about to radio for a female officer when the woman walked out, but she didn't come out of the restroom. She came from behind the building from the desert side, walking with that same mechanical gait. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I asked, my hand instinctively moving to my weapon. She stopped and turned to look at me, and that's when I saw her eyes. They were normal eyes, brown, middle-aged, probably needed glasses, but they were looking through me, not at me, like she was seeing something 1,000 yards behind my head. When she spoke, her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was reading from a script she didn't understand. "I need to return to my vehicle. I have been gone for the appropriate amount of time." "The appropriate amount of time?" I repeated. "Ma'am, have you been drinking tonight? Using any substances?" "I need to return to my vehicle," she said again. Exact same inflection. "I have been gone for the appropriate amount of time." She walked past me, still with that unnatural gait, got into her Camry, and sat there. Didn't start the engine, didn't adjust the mirror, just sat there, hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead at nothing. I ran her plates. Jennifer Chun, 43, from San Diego. No warrants, no criminal record, registered nurse at a hospital in La Jolla. I walked back to her car and tapped on the window. She didn't respond. I could see her breathing, could see her blink occasionally, but she didn't acknowledge my presence at all. That's when I noticed the driver of the F-150 had gotten out. A man, probably mid-30s, construction worker type based on his clothes, and he was walking exactly the same way Jennifer Chun had walked. Same mechanical gait, same lack of arm movement, same dead straight line toward the restroom. "Sir," I called out, "I need to speak with you." He stopped, turned, and looked through me with the same 1,000-why stare. "I need to use the facilities. I will be gone for the appropriate amount of time." "What does that mean, appropriate amount of time?" I demanded. "I need to use the facilities," he repeated in the exact same tone. "I will be gone for the appropriate amount of time." I let him go, but followed at a distance. He entered the men's restroom, and I waited outside, checking my watch. At exactly 15 minutes, not 14, not 16, but exactly 15, he emerged, but again, not from the restroom, from behind the building, from the desert side, just like Jennifer Chun. Now, I was seriously concerned. I radioed dispatch, requesting backup and reporting suspicious behavior at the rest stop. The dispatcher, Betty, who'd been working nights longer than I'd been alive, acknowledged the call, but sounded distracted. "Torres, what time did you say you arrived at mile marker 89? 2:02:03 a.m. I replied, checking my notes. There was a long pause. "Marcus, according to my board, you checked in from mile marker 89 at 2:03 a.m. on Tuesday." "It's Thursday, Betty." "No, Mark. No, Marcus. It's Saturday. You've been off the grid for over 48 hours. We've had search teams looking for you since Thursday morning." I felt the blood drain from my face. That was impossible. I'd started my shift 2 hours ago. It was Thursday night. I looked at my phone. Dead. My watch stopped at 2:17 a.m. My dash cam, the timestamp read Saturday, August 17th, 21:19 a.m. "Betty, I need backup at this location immediately. Something's wrong here. Very wrong. Already en route. Torres, get out of there. Whatever's happening at that rest stop, get out now." But as I turned to run back to my cruiser, I saw him. A man standing at the edge of the parking lot where the light met the desert darkness. He was tall, impossibly tall, maybe 7 feet, wearing what looked like a highway patrol uniform from the 1970s. His face was hidden in the shadow of his campaign hat, but I could see his smile. Too many teeth. Way too many teeth. "Officer Torres," he said, and his voice sounded like it was coming from multiple directions at once. "You need to stay. You will be gone for the appropriate amount of time." "Who are you?" I demanded, drawing my weapon. "I'm the night shift supervisor," he said, taking a step forward into the light. His face was wrong. It had all the right parts: eyes, nose, mouth, but they were arranged slightly off, like someone had tried to draw a human face from memory and got the proportions wrong. This is my rest stop. These are my travelers. And now, Officer Torres, you're going to join them. The air around me suddenly felt thick, like trying to breathe soup. My vision started to blur at the edges. I could hear Jennifer Chun and the construction worker getting out of their vehicles, walking toward me with that same mechanical gait. In the distance, I heard sirens. Backup was coming, but they sounded so far away, like they were in another world. Time doesn't work right here, Officer Torres. The thing in the uniform said, between 2 and 4 a.m. This place isn't quite in your reality. It's in mine. And in my reality, 48 hours can pass in what feels like seconds. Or seconds can stretch into years. It all depends on how much time I need. Need for what? I managed to ask, my hand shaking as I kept my weapon trained on him. To feed, he said simply. Not on flesh or blood, on time. On the hours and days and years that you humans waste. So carelessly. Every person who stops here between 2 and 4 a.m. donates 48 hours of their life to me. They don't remember it, of course. To them, it feels like 15 minutes. A quick bathroom break, but I keep those hours, store them, savor them. And Officer Torres, you've been here so many times, night after night, taking your breaks, writing your reports. You've been feeding me for years without knowing it. The sirens were getting closer. I could see lights on the highway, multiple units responding. The thing that looked like a trooper started to fade, becoming translucent. They can't enter while the rest stop is in my time, he said, sounding amused. But sunrise is coming. My time is ending. You're lucky, Officer Torres. Most who see me don't get to leave. But you're going to be my messenger. You're going to tell them what happens here, and they're not going to believe you. The pressure in my head suddenly released. The thick air became normal desert night. The mechanical people, Jennifer Chun and the construction worker, suddenly collapsed, unconscious, but breathing. And the thing in the trooper uniform was gone like he'd never been there at all. Backup arrived moments later. 3 highway patrol units and 2 sheriff's deputies. They found me standing in the middle of the parking lot, weapon drawn, shaking like I had hypothermia despite the 90 degrees night. Jennifer Chun and the construction worker, his name was David Mills, were taken to the hospital. They had no memory of the last 48 hours. Their car's GPS system showed they'd been driving normally until they'd stopped at the rest area. Then there was a 48-hour gap. Then they were here. The Winnebago was the worst. The elderly couple inside, Harold and Martha Brennan from Wisconsin, had been reported missing 3 weeks ago. According to them, they'd just stopped to use the restroom. They had no idea they'd been gone for 21 days. Their families had already started planning memorial services. I filed my report. Every detail, every impossible thing I'd seen. The response was exactly what the thing had predicted. Disbelief, skepticism, suggestions that I'd experienced a psychological break. The official report blamed it on a gas leak from a damaged pipe near the rest area, causing hallucinations and blackouts. The rest stop was closed for maintenance for 3 months. But here's what they didn't put in the official report. This wasn't the first time. I found records going back to 1973 when that rest stop was first built. Dozens of missing persons cases, all last seen on I-40 near mile marker 89. All reported stopping at a rest area that, according to official records, didn't exist yet. Time distortions reported by truckers. Highway patrol officers who quit suddenly after night shifts on that stretch of road. And here's the thing that really got to me. I checked my own records. Over 7 years, I'd stopped at that rest area probably 300 times during night shifts, always between 2 and 4 a.m. If I'd lost 48 hours each time, that's over 3 years of my life. 3 years stolen in 15-minute increments. 3 years I'll never get back. They reopened the rest stop in November 2019, put up new lights, installed security cameras, even had a highway patrol unit stationed there during peak hours, but not between 2 and 4 a.m. Never between 2 and 4 a.m. That's policy now, though they won't say why. just that the rest area is closed for maintenance during those hours. But I know people still stop there. Tired truckers who don't see the signs in the dark. Families pushing through the night to make good time. Tourists who don't know any better. And every time someone stops there between 2 and 4 a.m., they donate 48 hours of their life to something that wears the face of a state trooper from 1973 and feeds on time itself. After the incident, I couldn't let it go. They put me on administrative leave for 2 weeks. Mandatory psychological evaluation, the whole 9 yards. The department shrink, Dr. Patricia Reeves, was a nice enough woman who clearly thought I'd suffered some kind of breakdown. She prescribed rest, recommended therapy, and suggested I avoid night shifts for a while. But I could see in her eyes that she'd been briefed to handle this quietly, to get me back on the road as soon as possible without making waves. During those 2 weeks off, I did what any cop would do. I investigated. I started with the historical records at the Arizona State Library in Phoenix. If this thing had been happening since 1973, there had to be a paper trail. What I found was worse than I expected. The rest stop at mile marker 89 was built on historically significant land. Before it was a rest stop, before it was a highway, before Arizona was even a state, that patch of desert had a reputation. The Hopi and Navajo peoples had stories about that area dating back centuries. They called it the place where time sleeps and avoided it, especially at night. Spanish conquistadors in the 1540s reported losing entire days when camping in that area, arriving at their destinations weeks late with no memory of the delay. In 1873, exactly 100 years before the rest stop was built, a cavalry unit stationed at Fort Whipple reported a strange incident. An entire patrol, 12 men and their horses, disappeared for 6 days while crossing that stretch of desert. When they returned, they claimed they'd only been gone for an afternoon. The commanding officer's report, which I found in the military archives, described the men as displaced in time and noted that several of them aged rapidly over the following months, as if their bodies were catching up to the time they'd lost. But the most interesting discovery came from the construction records of the rest stop itself. In 1973, the project was delayed multiple times due to what was officially listed as equipment malfunction. However, I found a letter from the construction foreman to his wife, donated to the Historical Society as part of a collection on Arizona's interstate development. In it, he wrote, "Mary, something's not right about this place. We've lost 3 days this week. I mean, really lost them. We show up Monday morning, and suddenly it's Thursday. The boys are spooked. Henderson quit yesterday. Said he saw someone in an old highway patrol uniform walking around the site at night. Except highway patrol says they haven't assigned anyone to this stretch yet. I'm thinking of pulling the plug on this whole project. Contract be damned." The rest stop was eventually completed, but the construction company went bankrupt within a year. The foreman, James Mitchell, died in 1974 at the age of 45. Looking, according to his obituary, decades older than his years. I reached out to other troopers, both active and retired, who'd worked that stretch of I-40. Most wouldn't talk to me, but a few did, always off the record, always nervous. They all had stories. Trooper Mike Daniels, retired in 2010, told me about finding abandoned cars at the rest stop with engines still running, keys in the ignition, but no sign of the drivers. The missing persons would turn up days later hundreds of miles away with no memory of how they got there. Sarah Vega, who'd worked nights in the early 2000s, had her own encounter. She'd stopped at the rest area at 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday in 2003. And the next thing she knew, it was Friday afternoon, and she was in her patrol car on the side of I-40, 20 m from the rest stop. Her dash cam footage from those 3 days showed her car driving normally, stopping for gas, even apparently conducting traffic stops, but she had no memory of any of it. The footage was eventually lost by the department. Then there was Detective Ray Hoffman from the Phoenix PD, who'd investigated a series of missing persons cases in 2015 that all traced back to the rest stop. He discovered something that made my blood run cold. A pattern in the disappearances. They weren't random. The thing, whatever it was, seemed to target specific types of people at specific times. Every 7 years, there would be a spike in incidents. 1973, 1980, 1987, 1994, 2001, 2008, 2015. And 2022 was coming up. But more disturbing was who it targeted during these spike years. It wasn't just random travelers. It was always people connected to law enforcement, military or government services, as if it was collecting those who served, those who protected, those who maintained order. And during these spike years, some people didn't come back. They disappear entirely. Their cars found abandoned. No trace of them ever found. I compiled all of this into a report and brought it to my supervisor, Captain Janet Rodriguez. She was a good cop, been with Highway Patrol for 25 years, and I could see she wasn't entirely surprised by what I was showing her. "Marcus," she said, closing my report without reading it fully. "There are some things in this job that we just accept and work around that rest stop. We know about it. We've always known about it. Why do you think we have that unofficial policy about avoiding it between 2 and 4 a.m.? People are losing days of their lives, Captain. Some are disappearing entirely. And what would you have us do? Close down a major interstate? Tell the public that there's a temporal anomaly at a rest stop? Can you imagine the panic? The media circus? So, we just let it continue." She was quiet for a moment, then pulled out a file from a locked drawer in her desk. "This is classified. I shouldn't be showing you this, but you need to understand what we're dealing with." The file was labeled Project Kronos, 1973 to present. Inside were documents from various federal agencies, FBI, CIA, even some departments I didn't recognize. They'd been studying the rest stop since it was built. No, that's not right. They'd built the rest stop specifically to contain something that was already there. According to the documents, in 1972, a team of government scientists had detected what they called a temporal anomaly in that stretch of desert. Something that existed outside normal spacing, something that had been there for thousands of years. They couldn't eliminate it, couldn't understand it. So, they did the only thing they could. They built a structure around it to monitor and contain it. The rest stop wasn't just a rest stop. It was a containment facility designed to limit the entity's interaction with our world to specific hours and specific locations. The bathroom buildings contained monitoring equipment. The parking lot was laid out in a specific pattern meant to channel and focus the anomaly. Even the vending machines were part of it, though the documents didn't explain how. The entity, the report stated, appears to be a consciousness existing primarily in a parallel time stream that intersects with our reality at this specific geographical location. It feeds on temporal energy, essentially time taken from living beings. The construction of the rest area has successfully limited its feeding to a 2-hour window each night and prevented it from expanding its influence beyond the designated boundaries. But the report also noted that the entity was learning, adapting. It had figured out how to take human form, how to communicate, how to lure people in. And every 7 years, during what they called surge periods, it grew stronger, able to take more than just time. "We've had people on this for 50 years. Marcus," Captain Rodriguez said, "scientists, researchers, even some people who claim to be temporal specialists, whatever that means. The consensus is that it can't be stopped, only managed. And the current management strategy is to let it feed in controlled amounts rather than risk it breaking free entirely. So we're just sacrificing people's time, years of their lives. Would you prefer we sacrifice their entire lives? Because that's what happened before the containment. Read the Spanish records. Entire expeditions vanishing. The Native Americans knew to avoid it entirely. At least now people lose 48 hours and walk away alive." I wanted to argue, but I could see her point. It was the lesser of two evils, but it still didn't sit right with me. That night, against all advice and common sense, I went back to the rest stop. It was 1:45 a.m. when I arrived, 15 minutes before the danger window. I parked across the highway where I could observe, but not be within the containment area. I had cameras, recording equipment, even some EMF detectors I'd bought online. I was going to document this thing properly. At exactly 2 a.m., the change was visible even from across the highway. The lights at the rest stop dimmed, not like they were losing power, but like the light itself was being absorbed by something. The air above the parking lot shimmered like heat waves, but it was only 75 degrees. And then I saw him, the tall figure in the 1970s highway patrol uniform, standing in the middle of the parking lot. Through my binoculars, I watched as a semi-truck pulled in. The driver, obviously tired, probably pushing his hours, parked and headed for the restroom. The entity followed him, walking with impossible smoothness, like it was gliding rather than stepping. The trucker entered the restroom. The entity stood outside waiting. And then something happened that the reports hadn't mentioned. The entity split. One version remained by the restroom, while another appeared by the truck. This second version climbed into the cab, and I watched in horror as it began to drive. The truck pulled out of the rest stop and continued down I-40 with the entity at the wheel. Meanwhile, the original entity remained at the rest stop, still waiting by the restroom. 15 minutes later, the trucker emerged from behind the building, walking mechanically just like Jennifer Chin had. He got into his truck, which was somehow back in its parking spot, though I'd seen it leave, and sat there staring straight ahead. The entity stood beside the truck, placed its hand on the hood, and seemed to draw something out of the vehicle. A faint luminescence that flowed from the truck into the entity. This continued throughout the 2-hour window. 7 vehicles stopped. 7 people lost 48 hours, and each time I saw the entity split, taking one version of the person in their vehicle while leaving another behind. It wasn't just stealing time. It was creating parallel timelines, living out those 48 hours in some other reality while the original person sat frozen in ours. At 3:45 a.m., something unexpected happened. An old pickup truck pulled in and outstepped an elderly Native American man. He was wearing traditional dress and carrying what looked like a medicine bundle. The entity approached him but stopped about 10 feet away, like it had hit an invisible wall. The old man spoke in a language I didn't recognize, but his tone was clear. He was performing some kind of ritual or prayer. He walked around the rest stop, sprinkling something from his bundle, never acknowledging the entity, but clearly aware of it. The entity followed him, always maintaining that 10-foot distance. And for the first time, it looked agitated, its form flickering and distorting. At exactly 4 a.m., the entity vanished. The lights returned to normal. The shimmering stopped, and the old man got back in his truck and drove away. I tried to follow him, but he turned off onto a dirt road that seemed to lead nowhere, and I lost him in the pre-dawn darkness. I later learned from a contact at the Hopi Cultural Center that there were still people who maintained the old protections, who came to that spot to perform rituals that kept the entity contained. They'd been doing it for centuries, long before the government built their containment facility. The rest stopped the monitoring equipment, the federal project. It was all just modern window dressing on ancient knowledge. Your government thinks they control it, my contact, a man named Joseph Taloe, told me. But they only built a cage around something that was already caged. My people, the Navajo, the Apache, we bound it long ago. The rituals keep it bound. Your rest stop just gives it a feeding trough so it doesn't break free trying to hunt. Why didn't anyone tell the government this? Joseph laughed, but there was no humor in it. Would they have listened? Would they have believed that some old Indians knew better than their scientists? No, they needed to discover it for themselves, to put it in their reports and files. Meanwhile, we continue the real work, the work our ancestors started. Can it be destroyed, banished? Maybe, he said, looking thoughtful. But the cost would be high. To destroy something that exists outside time, you would need to sacrifice an equivalent amount of time. Hundreds of years, maybe thousands. Who would make such a sacrifice? I thought about all the people who'd lost 48 hours at that rest stop. All the time that had been stolen fed to this entity. If you added it all up, hundreds of people over 50 years, each losing 2 days, it was already thousands of hours. Years of human life fed to something that shouldn't exist. But Joseph had one more revelation for me, one that chilled me to the bone. The entity you saw, he said, the one that looks like a policeman from the 1970s. That's not its true form. That's William Brennan, Arizona Highway Patrol, badge number 4782. He disappeared in 1973, 3 weeks after the rest stop opened. He was the first law enforcement officer it took completely. It wears his form, uses his memories, pretends to be human. But William Brennan has been gone for almost 50 years. What you're seeing is just an echo, a puppet made of stolen time. I looked up William Brennan's records. Joseph was right. Disappeared October 13th, 1973. Last seen at mile marker 89. His body was never found. His patrol car was discovered at the rest stop. Engine running, door open, but no trace of Brennan. The official report listed him as missing, presumed dead. But now I knew the truth. He wasn't dead. He was something worse. A skin suit for an entity that existed outside time, doomed to serve it for eternity. That knowledge broke something in me. Every time I'd seen that thing, I'd been looking at a fellow officer trapped and transformed into something monstrous. And if it could happen to him, it could happen to any of us. The next spike year was coming, 2022, and I had a terrible feeling that the entity would be looking for a new suit to wear, a new officer to absorb and transform. I requested a transfer the next day. California, New Mexico, Nevada, anywhere but Arizona. They denied it. Said I was too valuable, too experienced on that stretch of I-40. That's when I knew. They wanted me there. The department, the government, whatever shadow organization was really running Project Kronos, they were keeping me in place for a reason. The year 2022 approached like a storm system on the radar, inevitable, ominous, and tracked with increasing anxiety by those of us who knew what it meant. I tried everything to get away from Arizona, from that cursed stretch of I-40. I'd applied for positions in other states, even considered leaving law enforcement entirely. But every application was rejected. Every opportunity mysteriously fell through. It was as if invisible hands were keeping me in place, ensuring I'd be there when the surge period arrived. By January 2022, the signs were already starting. Reports of temporal anomalies along I-40 increased dramatically. Truckers were losing entire days, not just 48 hours. Families were arriving at their destinations weeks late with no memory of the delay, and the rest stop at mile marker 89 was becoming active outside its usual 2 to 4 a.m. window. Captain Rodriguez called me into her office on a cold February morning. She looked like she'd aged a decade in the past year, and I noticed her hands shaking slightly as she poured coffee. "Marcus, we need to talk about what's coming," she said, not meeting my eyes. "The surge period. Project Kronos has been monitoring the readings, and this one's going to be different. Bigger." "How much bigger?" She pulled out a tablet, showing me graphs and data I didn't fully understand. "The entity's energy signatures have been increasing exponentially. It's been feeding more efficiently, storing more temporal energy. The scientists think it's preparing for something." Preparing for what? To break free. To expand beyond the rest stop, maybe beyond Arizona entirely. She finally looked at me, and I saw fear in her eyes. "They think it wants to create a permanent bridge between its dimension and ours. No more 2-hour feeding windows. No more geographical limitations. Just free access to our timeline." The implications were staggering. If this thing could move freely through our world, stealing time from anyone, anywhere, creating parallel timelines at will, it would be chaos. Reality itself would become unstable. "What's the plan?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. "The Native American tribes have agreed to perform a binding ritual, something that hasn't been attempted in over 200 years. But it requires a sacrifice. Someone connected to law enforcement. Someone who's been marked by the entity. Someone who understands what they're giving up." She paused, unable to say the words. "Someone like me." I finished for her. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. Marcus, I want you to know this isn't an order. We can't order someone to do this. But if you don't, how many people will it take? How many will disappear completely? The projections say hundreds in the first year, thousands within a decade. And that's assuming it doesn't figure out how to reproduce or bring others of its kind through. I thought about my daughter Emma just starting college at ASU. I thought about all the families driving through Arizona unaware of the danger. I thought about William Brennan trapped as the entity's puppet for 50 years. And I made my decision. What exactly does this sacrifice involve? Rodriguez pulled out another file. This one marked with symbols I recognized from Joseph Talopai's explanations. Native American protection markers. You would need to voluntarily enter the entity's dimension during the surge period. Not just lose 48 hours, but fully cross over. Once there, you would act as an anchor for the binding ritual. The tribal elders would seal the portal with you on the other side, trapping the entity in its own dimension. With me trapped there, too. Yes, the ritual requires a willing sacrifice from our world to balance the entity being forced back to its world. It's the only way to make the binding permanent. How long would I be there? We don't know. Time works differently in that dimension. It could feel like days or centuries to you. But in our world, you would simply cease to exist. Your body would vanish. Your records would fade. People would gradually forget you existed. It's not death exactly, but it's worse, I said. It's being erased. She nodded, unable to speak. I spent the next few weeks getting my affairs in order. I couldn't tell Emma the truth. How do you tell your daughter you're about to sacrifice yourself to a temporal entity? Instead, I told her I was being transferred to a deep undercover assignment, that I might be out of contact for a long time. We spent a weekend together in Sedona, hiking, talking, making memories I hoped would last her a lifetime, even if she forgot who gave them to her. I met with Joseph Talopai and the other tribal elders preparing for the ritual. They taught me what to expect, how to maintain my sense of self in a dimension where time and identity were fluid. They gave me protective items, a medicine bundle, sacred corn pollen, an obsidian blade that had been blessed by 100 generations of medicine men. The entity will try to absorb you like it did Officer Brennan, Joseph explained. It will offer you power, immortality, freedom from linear time. You must resist. Your sacrifice only works if you remain yourself. Remain human. Remain connected to this world even while trapped in theirs. How did Brennan fail? He didn't go willingly. He was taken during the first surge period, fought against it, and in his fear and anger, he gave the entity an opening. It consumed his resistance and used it as fuel. You must go with acceptance, not resignation, with purpose, not despair. March 21st, 2022, the spring equinox, when the tribal elders said the barrier would be thinnest. That would be the night. I made my last patrol that evening, driving the familiar stretch of I-40 one final time. The desert was beautiful in the twilight, painted in purples and golds. I'd always loved this job despite everything. The open road, the vast sky, the feeling of protecting people. I was going to miss it. I was going to miss everything. At 1:45 a.m., I arrived at the rest stop for the last time. The tribal delegation was already there. Representatives from the Hopi, Navajo, Apache, and Tuno Odom nations. They had surrounded the rest area with a circle of sacred items, creating a boundary that would hopefully contain what was about to happen. Captain Rodriguez was there, too, along with a small team from Project Kronos. Everyone looked grim. At exactly 2 a.m., the entity appeared, but this time it wasn't wearing William Brennan's form. It was shifting, fluctuating, as if it could sense what was about to happen. Sometimes it looked like Brennan, sometimes like other missing persons from over the years. Sometimes like nothing human at all. Officer Torres, it said in its multidirectional voice. You've come back. I've been waiting for you. I know what you are, I said, stepping forward. And I know what you want. Do you? Do you really understand what I'm offering? Not just 48 hours, Officer Torres. Eternity, freedom from your linear existence. The ability to see all of time at once, to exist in every moment simultaneously. And in exchange, you get to feed on our world freely. It laughed, a sound like glass breaking in reverse. Your world is already mine. I just take small sips now, bound by these primitive rituals and government containment. But soon, very soon, I'll drink deeply. Not if I stop you. You're just one human. One tiny spark of consciousness in an infinite cosmos. What can you possibly do? This, I said, and stepped across the boundary, fully entering the rest stop. Immediately, I felt the change. The air became thick. Time became tangible, like moving through water. The entity's true form became visible. A writhing mass of temporal energy. Tentacles of stolen time reaching out in all directions, each one connected to a different moment. It had fed from. Foolish, it said, and I felt its consciousness pressing against mine, trying to overwhelm me, to absorb me like it had absorbed Brennan. But I was ready. I held on to my memories, Emma's laugh, my late wife's smile, the pride of putting on the uniform for the first time. These moments were mine, and I wouldn't let them go. "Begin the ritual," Joseph shouted, and the tribal elders started chanting, their voices harmonizing in ancient languages that predated European contact by millennia. The entity realized what was happening and roared in fury. Reality started to fracture around us. I saw multiple versions of myself. One where I'd never become a cop. One where I'd died in Iraq. One where Emma was never born. The entity was showing me all the timelines, trying to confuse me, to make me lose track of which reality was mine. But I held on to the obsidian blade Joseph had given me, its edge so sharp it could cut through time itself. I slashed at the tentacles of temporal energy, severing the entity's connections to our world. Each cut was agony. I was literally cutting away pieces of stolen time, and I could feel every moment. Every person's lost hours, screaming as they were freed. "You don't know what you're doing," the entity raged. "Without me, your timeline will collapse. I'm the only thing holding it together." "Liar," I said, continuing to cut. "You're a parasite. You've been feeding on us for millennia, but we survived before you and will survive after." The chanting grew louder, and I felt the portal beginning to form. Not a doorway between dimensions, but a closing, a ceiling. The entity was being pulled back to its own dimension, and I was being pulled with it. "If I go, you go," it screamed. "You'll be trapped forever." "I know," I said, and for the first time, I saw something like fear in its consciousness. The last thing I saw of my world was Emma's face. Not really there, but a memory so strong it might as well have been real. Then the portal closed, and I was somewhere else entirely. How do I describe a dimension where time doesn't flow linearly, where past, present, and future exist simultaneously? Where you can be in multiple places at once, experiencing every moment of your existence at the same time. I was 5 years old, learning to ride a bike. I was 22, graduating from the academy. I was 35, holding Emma for the first time. I was 50, standing in an alien dimension as guardian and prisoner. All of these moments were real, were happening. The entity was there with me, but diminished, contained, without access to our world's timeline. It couldn't feed, couldn't grow. It raged and threatened, but I had something it didn't. Purpose. I wasn't here as its victim, but as its jailer. The obsidian blade had become part of me in this dimension, a will made manifest that kept the entity from escaping. "How long will you last?" it asked. "A human consciousness in a place where time has no meaning. You'll go insane within days." "Maybe," I admitted, "but those days in here could be centuries in my world. Long enough for them to forget about the rest stop. To let the highway decay, to remove the anchor point you need to return. You don't understand what you've sacrificed." "I understand perfectly. I've sacrificed my existence to save thousands of others. It's what cops do. We protect and serve even when the cost is everything." Time passed or didn't pass. It's hard to explain. I experienced every moment of my life simultaneously while also experiencing new moments that couldn't possibly exist. I saw Emma graduate, get married, have children, though I knew I wouldn't be there for any of it. I saw the rest stop being demolished, the highway rerouted, the land returned to the desert. I saw the tribal elders maintaining their vigil, ensuring the binding held. And through it all, I held on to my humanity. My name is Marcus Torres. I was an Arizona state trooper. I had a daughter named Emma. I loved my job. I saved people. These facts were my anchor in a place where facts were fluid. The entity eventually stopped raging and started bargaining. It offered me knowledge of the future, power over time, the ability to return and live forever. I refused everything. Then it tried to break me with visions of what I was missing. Emma's wedding, where my absence was a void everyone felt but couldn't name. My grandchildren I'd never meet. My own funeral where no one came because no one remembered I'd existed. But Joseph had prepared me for this, too. The sacrifice is not just your life, he'd said. It's your memory, your impact, your very existence. But the universe remembers. Every person who drives safely through Arizona, every family that arrives at their destination on time, every life not lost to temporal feeding, they exist because of your choice. Even if they never know it, I don't know how long I've been here. Time doesn't mean anything in this place. I could tell you it's been days, years, centuries, and all would be equally true and false. I exist in a moment that stretches forever and collapses to nothing simultaneously. But I'm still Marcus Torres. I'm still human. And somehow, impossibly, I'm still able to tell this story. You see, the entity made a mistake. It brought me fully into its dimension, thinking it could absorb me like it did William Brennan. But I came willingly as a sacrifice, not a victim. That choice, that intentional crossing, created something neither of us expected. A bridge, not one that lets the entity return to our world, but one that lets me send messages back. Echoes of my existence rippling backward through time. This recording you're hearing, it's one of those echoes. I'm sending it through the cracks in reality, through the spaces between seconds, hoping someone somewhere will hear it and understand what happened at mile marker 89. The entity and I exist in a strange symbiosis now. It can't absorb me because I won't let it. And I can't leave because leaving would mean releasing it. We're locked in an eternal stalemate. Two consciousnesses sharing a space outside normal reality. It still looks like William Brennan sometimes when it wants to communicate in a way my human mind can process. You know your daughter doesn't remember you. It says wearing Brennan's face like an ill-fitting mask. Emma Torres graduated from ASU with honors, became a teacher, got married, has 2 kids now, never mentions her father because to her, she never had one. These revelations used to hurt, but I've moved beyond hurt. In this dimension, I can see the threads of causality, the ripples of change. Yes, Emma doesn't remember me, but she has a deep, inexplicable drive to help others, to protect people. That came from somewhere she can't name. My absence is a presence in her life, shaping her in ways she'll never understand. That's the thing about sacrifice. I tell the entity, it's not about being remembered. It's about the change you create, the lives you save, the future you make possible. Let me tell you what happened after I crossed over. What I can see from this vantage point outside time. The binding ritual worked. The surge period of 2022 passed without a single disappearance. The rest stop at mile marker 89 became just another rest stop. People use it at all hours now, even between 2 and 4 a.m. and nothing happens. They use the bathrooms, buy snacks from the vending machines, and continue on their journeys, never knowing they're walking on ground that was once a feeding ground for something that existed outside time. Captain Rodriguez retired immediately after the ritual. She couldn't explain why one of her best troopers had vanished. Couldn't reconcile the official story with what she knew to be true. The last report she filed mentioned me, but by the time anyone read it, my name had been redacted by reality itself. Now, it just refers to an officer who went missing during a routine patrol. Joseph Talpe and the tribal elders continue their vigil, though they're not entirely sure why anymore. They know something important happened at mile marker 89. Know their rituals keep something contained, but the details fade more each year. That's the price of erasing someone from existence. Even the memory of the eraser fades. Project Kronos was quietly shut down in late 2022. The official reason was budget cuts, but the real reason was that the anomaly they were studying had ceased to exist. All those decades of research, all those classified files gradually became irrelevant, describing something that no longer was. And from their perspective, perhaps never had been. But here's the strange part. Echoes remain. Truckers still tell stories about the rest stop at mile marker 89, though the stories have changed. Now they say if you stop there at exactly 2:17 a.m. and listen carefully, you can hear a voice on the radio, even if it's turned off. A state trooper calling in his position, saying he's taking a break, that everything's quiet on I-40. They say it's good luck to hear it, that it means your journey will be safe. They're hearing me. These moments when I manage to push through, to touch our world just briefly, they leave impressions. Not memories exactly, but something deeper. A feeling of being protected, watched over, served. The entity finds this amusing and frustrating in equal measure. You're becoming a ghost story, it says. A legend. Soon you'll be just as mythical as I was. Maybe. I agree. But I'll be a ghost story that saves people, not one that feeds on them. We've had decades, centuries, moments to talk, the entity and I. I've learned things about it that no human should know. It's not evil. Not exactly. It's a consciousness from a dimension where time is food, where existence is measured in consumed moments rather than lived once. To it, taking 48 hours from someone's life was no different than us taking milk from a cow. It didn't understand that those hours meant missed birthdays, lost opportunities, forgotten memories. Your kind fascinated me, it admits during one of our eternal conversations. You experience time so linearly, so preciously, every moment unique and irreplaceable. In my dimension, all moments exist simultaneously. We can revisit them, reshape them, consume them, and regenerate them. The concept of loss was foreign to me until I encountered humanity. And now I understand loss. I'm experiencing it. Trapped here, unable to feed, unable to grow. I'm dying in a way my kind doesn't normally die. I'm becoming finite. I'm sorry, I say, and surprisingly, I mean it. Why? I was going to consume your entire timeline. Because no consciousness should have to face extinction alone. That's when the entity tells me something that changes everything. It's not the only one of its kind. There are others at other thin places around the world feeding on time contained by various means. The rest stop at mile marker 89 was just one feeding ground among many. The one in Ohio is contained by an old steel mill that runs 24/7. It tells me the workers don't know their jailers. The one in Maine is trapped in a lighthouse feeding on ships that never quite arrive when they should. The one in Louisiana is bound by music. Jazz specifically, playing eternally in a club that exists in 1920 and 2020 simultaneously. How many? Dozens, maybe hundreds. Your world is full of holes, Officer Torres. Places where time leaks, where reality is negotiable. Most are small, managed by accident rather than design. But some are like you were growing, feeding, preparing. Yes, and without me to communicate with them, to share what I've learned about humanity, they'll make the same mistakes I did. They'll push too hard, take too much until someone like you stops them or fails to stop them. This is why I'm sending this message back. Why I'm using my connection to our world to create this echo. Someone needs to know. Someone needs to watch. Someone needs to be ready to make the same sacrifice I did if necessary. But here's the thing about sacrifice. It's not always permanent. The entity is dying, becoming finite, and when it finally fades completely, the binding will break. Not in a way that releases it, but in a way that might possibly release me. Joseph Toloe knew this, though he didn't tell me at the time. He left a message in the ritual itself, a fragment of hope, when the guardian has guarded for 1,000 moments that last forever. When the prisoner has become the jail, when the sacrifice has been both made and unmade, then the road home opens. I don't fully understand it yet, but I feel something changing. The entity grows weaker each day, century, moment, and as it does, I grow more solid, more real. Sometimes I can almost touch our world, almost manifest enough to be seen. Truckers catch glimpses of a state trooper in their mirrors. Families see a patrol car that isn't there escorting them through dangerous weather. Children lost at rest stops find themselves guided back to their parents by a kind officer who vanishes when they turn to thank him. These aren't hauntings, they're practice. I'm learning to exist in both dimensions simultaneously, to be the bridge rather than just the guardian. And someday, maybe someday soon from your perspective or Ian's from mine, I'll step back through. Changed, certainly not quite human anymore probably, but still Marcus Torres, still a protector, still serving. The entity speaks less now, conserving what energy it has left. But yesterday, tomorrow now, it said something that surprised me. I chose the wrong officer in 1973. Brennan was weak, full of fear. But you're teaching me something I never understood. What's that? That protection is a form of consumption, too. You feed on the safety of others, grow strong from their well-being. It's not so different from what I did, just inverse. Maybe that's why we're stuck together. Two sides of the same coin, spinning eternally in a place where currency has no meaning. Marcus Torres, it says, using my name for the first time. When I'm gone, when you're free, will you remember me? Every time I stop at a rest area. Every time I check my watch at 2:17 a.m. Every time I protect someone from something they'll never know was there. The entity doesn't respond, but I feel something from it that might be satisfaction or peace or just the echo of emotions it learned from consuming human time. I need to end this message now. The bridge is weakening, the echo fading. But before I go, let me leave you with this. If you're ever driving through Arizona, especially on I-40, and you stop at a rest area at mile marker 89, take a moment to remember. Not me specifically. You can't. That's the nature of my sacrifice. But remember that someone somewhere, someone stood guard so you could stop safely. Someone chose to step into the darkness so you could stay in the light. And if you happen to be there at 2:17 a.m. and you hear a voice on your radio that shouldn't be there, a trooper calling in his position saying everything's quiet on I-40, know that it's true. Everything is quiet. Everything is safe. The guardian is still at his post, even if he's posting from outside time itself. My name is Marcus Torres. I was an Arizona state trooper. I am a guardian between dimensions. And someday, in a future that's also the past, in a moment that lasts forever in no time at all, I'll find my way home. Until then, drive safe. Watch for deer. Don't speed through construction zones. And maybe, just maybe, leave a coffee and a donut on your dashboard when you stop at mile marker 89. I can't drink them anymore. Can't eat them, but I can remember what they tasted like. And in a place where memory is reality, that's enough. The recording ends with static, but if you listen carefully, very carefully, you can hear something underneath the white noise. The sound of a patrol car's engine idling. The squawk of a radio. The scratch of a pen filling out a report. The sounds of a state trooper on eternal duty protecting a stretch of highway that exists in multiple dimensions at once. As of March 22, 2022, all anomalous activity at the designated site has ceased. The entity previously contained at this location is no longer detectable. Officer Redacted has been listed as missing, presumed dead, though no body has been recovered. Recommend continued monitoring of the site for residual temporal distortions. Several travelers have reported seeing a state trooper providing assistance despite no units being assigned to that area. These reports are considered psychological echoes of the anomaly and should be disregarded. The rest stop remains operational. No further containment necessary. Case closed. Handwritten note in margin. He's still out there, still watching, still protecting. The sacrifice worked, but not in the way we expected. The guardian became the containment. The prisoner became the jail. And somewhere in the spaces between seconds, Marcus Torres continues his patrol. God help him. God help us all, if he ever finds his way back. Because what returns from outside time is never quite what left. But maybe that's what we need. A guardian who exists in multiple dimensions. A protector who can see threats before they manifest. A state trooper whose jurisdiction extends beyond the physical world. Mile marker 89 is safe now. But there are other mile markers, other rest stops, other places where time grows thin. And we're going to need more guardians. We're going to need more sacrifices. We're going to need more heroes willing to step outside time itself. The question is, who's next?